And if we just pull back and not necessarily expose any of the particular OEMs that we looked at here, but you have, in this case, that top line. OEMs from China, and where the battery electric or the BEVs are the dominating one, you see this reduction going out to 2030 on the average embedded material carbon per vehicle. So again, comparing it to 2020, many of the OEMs are already going to be making great strides. They're going to be making this reduction. But because of that reliance, as more battery electric vehicles are going to be expected in these markets and in these regions, as so many nations are beginning to make this transition and more vehicles are beginning to get out there in the vehicle fleet, you begin to see a little bit of a flattening once we get out, we'll say about 2027 or so. And yet again, there's that need to now reduce those embedded materials inside the components that are featured in those battery electric vehicles. And yet again, let's go with another slide that kind of illustrates this example. You begin to see a little bit of a slight increase and sometimes stagnation when we look at the embedded carbons or the upstream carbon footprint of the BEVs, looking specifically at the battery. But the reduction is taking place when you look at many of the components that are featured in the rest of the vehicle. And again, I'll point out, we have to give credit at least to the efforts that have been made by many of the OEMs of the traditional ICE-based OEMs, I'll put it that way. Whether we're talking in Europe or Japan and China, et cetera, reductions have been made compared to 2020. You're beginning to see that drop down take place as they look at many of the components that are featured in the vehicles. This has been an area of focus, certainly as before, obviously because the percentage of battery electric vehicles in the landscape is still relatively low, especially in the US. They have made great strides in terms of improving fuel economy. And in the US, that has been driven mostly by CAFE standards. They've been making great strides in order to improve the emissions of those vehicles, and especially focusing more on the downstream side, but even on the upstream side, because that process and the overall analysis of the supply chain, a lot has been done and is being done in that area. And we certainly now expect that to take place on the BEVs as well going forward.